Hello, everyone. Very nice to see you all. Some friends, many friends, and some new people. So I'm Heather Eaton. I'm a professor in the School of Leadership, Ecology and Equity, and I am facilitating this conversation. We'll begin very shortly, but before we begin, I will read the territorial acknowledgement. Kwe Ketina, which is hello, everyone. Pijashig, which means welcome. We'd like to acknowledge that St. Paul University is located on traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe people. We'd like to honor the Anishinaabe, the first peoples of the land and the waters of Kitchissippi, and from time immemorial. We acknowledge that the site of the city of Ottawa is the home of the Anishinaabe, a place for spiritual ceremonies, cultural gatherings, and exchanges among First Peoples. Today, this spirit of peace and friendship is the foundation of relationships among Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples from around the globe. So welcome to our another session of our lunchtime series of being a leader. We have had several lunchtime conversations and we will have another one in June. Today, we have a special one. Just so you know, the purpose of these lunchtime conversations is for us to just gather and reflect with various kinds of leaders and people who've taken initiatives in communities on the topic of social transformation. So most of us here, if not all of us, are interested in social justice and eco-justice and in trying to be as constructive as possible in the world. So this is what the School of Leadership, Ecology and Equity is about, and St. Paul University. So that's the purpose of these lunchtime gatherings. Just so you know, we ask that you keep your webcam open. You're welcome to mute. It's advisable for you to mute, but it's very hard to speak. Linda Gregg is our speaker today, to speak to blank faces. So if you'd be willing to put your cameras on, that would be delightful. If you speak in the chat and your video is on, then it will be part of the video that posts on the YouTube channel. Some of you may not know, we're very famous. We have a YouTube channel. So we post all of our lunchtime conversations on the YouTube channel. While Linda is speaking and afterwards, you are welcome to submit questions in the chat. You can send them and you can send your reflections and conversations in the chat. And we will have about 10 minutes at the end for chatting and conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Carol Kozmochka, and our speaker, Linda Gregg. And Carol will be the person conversing with Linda. So over to you, Carol.
Great. Thank you, Heather. And I'm so happy to add my warm welcome to Heather's. Thank you all for being here with us today in this Being a Leader session, Cultivating the Soil, Cultivating Transformative Change, a conversation with Sister Linda Gregg. And an invitation, rather than being an audience, please accept our invitation to be engaged collaborators in this conversation. And it's my pleasure and my privilege to welcome and introduce our guest. Sister Linda Gregg grew up on the west coast of Canada, and she credits this with nurturing her deep love of God's creation. She has a background in market gardening and farming from a rural area of Victoria near the Bouchart Gardens, which fundamentally shaped her continuing commitment to create gardens wherever she goes. Sister Linda is a member of the religious congregation of St. Joseph. Currently, she coordinates an 80-plot organic community garden on the site of her religious community where people are invited to come, cultivate, and grow food for themselves. Sister Linda has an undergraduate degree in Indigenous Studies from Trent University and a Master of Divinity and a Doctor of Ministry degree in Ecotheology from the University of Toronto. She is an educator, a spiritual accompanier, and a master organic gardener who is committed to cultivating the soil and cultivating transformative change in all that she does. Sister Linda Gregg, welcome. And thank you so much for coming to engage in this important conversation today about cultivating the soil, cultivating transformative change.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and it's wonderful to be on Zoom to talking to this many people. So I look forward to the time with you all.
Thank you. Now, let's get started off on a little piece of your history and bring us into your own formation and your cultivation. So we've heard that growing up on the West Coast and learning about garden marketing and farming inspired the path that you've chosen in your leadership. Can you tell us a bit more about what motivated you to become a master organic gardener and how that plays an important role in your own leadership?
Well, as you know, I've always participated in growing gardens wherever I was, and that was fundamentally a part of who I was. And I had to continue that, and I had a lot of practical experience. To answer your specific question about why I took the Organic Master Gardeners course, because I wanted to ground it with some more science and some more research, as well as the practical. So it was to balance it out. I also had to balance my theology learning with practical. So to demonstrate in me that the two go together. One does not serve without the other. It's that practical living out of the cosmology of peace.
Thank you, Linda. Now, as you know, we've just launched this new school, which attends to the three axes of leadership, ecology, and equity. And I know from our conversations as we were preparing for today that you see these as integral in your own leadership. How can you share with us a little bit about how you've experienced cultivating the soil as also cultivating transformative change?
Well, it's interesting because when I was involved in those early years, I didn't really think about the end. I just knew that I had to somehow bring the two together. And actually, it was a part of my struggle of making final vows in my religious community, because my passion for the earth was very strong and I wanted to be a part of healing. And yet I felt God saying, take this step first. So in my own life, there's been the two streams working together. And it's a reconciliation task that is part of my life, and healing. And the garden is a place where you can do that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know as well that you're convinced in that mix that many current worldviews have us stuck, and transformative change will only come about through transformed worldviews. Would you like to share a little bit about this with us?
I would say that's highly important. Thomas Berry certainly emphasized it. And I was just looking through some notes, and Elizabeth Johnson says we have to rework theology, not just creation theology, but theology in the context of cosmology, because we're in a new worldview. We're in a time of transformative change. And now you can begin to feel it quicken around the globe. And you have to go where your heart is. And for me, I just had to somehow bring those two aspects of myself together, because they really weren't separated in my heart. And that was the struggle, because other people didn't see that or feel that 40 years ago. And what I learned is that sometimes you can talk. It's very hard at the beginning for the sisters to understand what I was struggling with and trying to make clear. And sometimes you can talk, and because we had a worldview of hierarchical, male, then female, and so on down to the bottom rung of creation, we considered only things from the human-centered way of looking at things, anthropocentrism. And we needed to expand our horizon. And retreat ministry was only about the human person and nurturing their journey when I first became a part of it. And it was a struggle to say, well, somehow creation is more than just a backdrop. Like they would say, well, we need the nature. It's a part of the retreat experience, but it's not the most important. It's the human interaction. So, and then you get frustrated because they don't understand and you don't understand how you can't help. So then you start to do something. So I got a shovel and I started to dig up the lawn. And that was really important. We had really good conversations after that. And I did have to limit how much I did, but also cultivating it, you have to be educated. You have to expand your horizon. And sisters, religious sisters, have always prepared their sisters for ministry. And you see, I have an undergrad degree in Native Studies because that's what I was being prepared for and felt called to at the time. And that was a wonderful part of my ministry. And then there was a time where coming here temporarily, because they were short-staffed, I needed more education to understand the cosmology, to understand Thomas Berry, to understand why people would come to me in spiritual direction and say, can I be a Christian and still love nature? I don't understand how you do it. And like to even have a question like that now in my life and in the life of so many, it isn't a question anymore because we've made the connections theologically. We know that it isn't pantheism. We know it's panentheism. So it's exciting because we've found the theological connections, but we've found the organic connections in the soil. And to me, they inform each other. It's a harmony, it's a rhythm. And it's something that we've lost the sense of how to live in that harmony and rhythm. One of the reasons that I started growing vegetables, because that's what I do, but was because we need to be embedded in the seasons, in the cycles of the universe. And unless we're concerned and a part of our life is connected to the cyclical seasons, to the seeding, to the growing, to the harvesting, to the letting go, it's all part of the Paschal mystery that comes to fruition in our souls and in the earth. So that is why we make our effort and have much joy from growing the vegetables and using them for the retreat center as much as we can. But it's to do as much as we can to repattern our souls so that we can see the beauty and the harmony that exists between the earth and human. It's earth, spirit, human. And we have to work on learning that Trinity again and learning the harmony and the joy that comes from that. There is so much devastation around the earth, and yet we do what we can where we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know you've described in our conversations, again in preparation, some really key experiences in your own life that have really opened this up for you and made that integral connection between the soil and everything else so clear to you. Is there an experience you could share with us to help us really see this at work in your own leadership development?
Well, I would say two things. One, because my father left us, we didn't have a place. And so my grandparents let us live in their cottage by the sea in rural Saanich out of Victoria. And there happened to be a 2-acre formal garden beside that. And so my mother was able to take my baby brother to work, and I got a little at 3.5 too much to handle. So the gardener next door, I was made an apprentice gardener at 3.5 because she looked after me, and I puddled around the gardens and watched her and listened to her. So it became a part of me. And, I remember when I was 5 years old, digging up a part of the garden at the back of our house and planting vegetables. So having the freedom in my childhood to roam the beaches and the woods and the rivers, that was essential. And in later years, my father came back and he had trouble getting jobs. He ended up starting a farm, and I was excited about that. So I became also aware of the struggle today for family farms. I became aware of the whole need for organic agriculture. And there is one more story about Butchart Garden, which is fundamental because the Butchart Gardens are world famous, and they are a huge sunken garden. And one can wonder, how did all that happen? It happened because Mr. Butchart had a gravel business and a construction business. And so behind their house, he found good gravel and sand. So he dug away and trucked many, many truckloads of gravel and sand. And then he ran out of the gravel and sand. So he left this huge, big 500-foot hole that was a couple of acres wide. Now, it was at the back of their house. And sure, there was a couple of trees, but Mrs. Butchart said, "You cannot leave the earth hurting like that. You've gouged her and you've taken, and we've benefited, but we've got to give something back to the earth because this is a raw wound." And so she got a wheelbarrow, put soil in it, and said to Mr. Butchart, "Start putting the soil back, and we're going to plant flowers." That was the beginning. And so I saw how many, many people would come and would be healed by those gardens, would know peace and harmony. So I saw that pattern of rebuilding, reconnecting, healing, building bridges to harmony.
Those are beautiful stories. And I wonder too and I know you make this connection, so I just love to hear you tell us a little bit more about this. How those wounds of the earth are a mirror, a reflection of other wounds that we also need to attend to.
I found working in the community garden, and you will find that you companion people because they have their own wounds, and the wounds are connected to the earth. One of the things that is very healing for people is to have their own little plot of garden and to be able to see the miracle of seeds. Like Thomas Berry said, to plant a seed is to activate one of the deepest mysteries of the universe. One of the deepest mysteries, and we stand in awe of that. I stand in awe of that every spring when I take these dried up looking seeds and plant them in the ground. So it's a witness to a miracle. But it's also, in my own journey, there was a lot of trauma in the early years. And I sought the earth to sustain me. And if the earth had not been there, if I had not been able to hold a tree and sob, and the many times where I struggled to find a moral way, to find what was healing, nature was there when people couldn't be there. So I'm aware of the deep healing powers of nature in my own life and want to share that gift with others.
Thank you. We know that at the heart of social ecological transformation is that definitive shift from the I to the we. And I feel like that's been embedded in much of what you're saying, that where we understand our interconnectedness, our interdependence, and our ethical responsibility to one another and to all created things. How are you, in an ongoing way, cultivating that in your own leadership? And what are your hopes for seeing that cultivated in leadership everywhere?
I think that one of the things we're beginning to realize is that our societal ethic, our culture of individualism has created problems. It's created of silos of education, of work, of class. We still have class systems in how we value people. And it's more subtle than feudal times, but it's there. And so how do we break those? We start having a common goal, a common urge to work together, a common need. So people are aware that is something wrong. More and more people are aware of climate change. The science has become clearer and clearer. And there is that shift for something more. And so I find that people come here are looking for that shift from I to we. And as we embrace we, part of that embracing is with the soil. I have to garden every year because I'm taught by what is in the soil and what that land is saying to me. And also we have to know that we're not the savior. God is, the creator is. And how can we be a conduit of that healing? How can we make the individual be cherished and yet inclusive in a community? It's a work in progress. All of us in our relationships and our families. And how do we find something? We have something together to work for. And more and more, it is absolutely marvelous the way religions are taking hold of this necessary aspect of their faith, which was not seen 30 or 40 years ago. And it still needs to be evangelized in local churches and many places. But the worldview, the cosmology of beyond ourselves, we became so enhanced and captured by our individual journey and thought that was the epitome. But people aren't happy. There's something missing. And people are beginning to search for it. So and what you do is you have an example that's lived.
Thank you. What are you hoping to see when you discuss that integration in people and the new realizations? What are you hoping to see will evolve in the leadership that's around you?
I would hope that they would be able to be grounded in their own soul and to see that as connected to the earth and to the universe. We have so much that is revealed to us by the telescopes and especially the recent Hubble telescope of the wonder and the awe that is there. There are so many religious experiences that people are beginning to have today because it's beyond what the individual is, beyond what just the human society is. And we thought that was all that was mattered. And we are beginning to learn that we're interdependent, as you said. We need to be with each other. And it's to find that balance between respecting the individual and the depth of soul and integrity of that, and the connection with the earth and the universe. I really like the fact that you have opened a school of leadership, ecology, and equity, because they are three streams that need to talk to each other. And yet you need the individual study in each aspect to be able to clarify what is needed. And then you have a conversation. And I think that it's the Trinity that is starting to be lived out in so many places today. And it's very exciting. The leadership school of the leadership, ecology, and equity is a wonderful combination.
Yes, thank you for saying that. We're pretty excited about it ourselves. And just as we continue our conversation, Linda, I just want to remind people, as you're listening, perhaps an insight, a comment you'd like to make gets sparked, or a question you'd like to ask. So please, by all means, either keep track of that, and there'll be a chance to speak that out with your own voice after we're finished chatting, or feel free to write it in the chat, and Heather will be helping us unpack all of that when our conversation is finished. So, Sister Linda, I know you have said, and I was very struck by this when we've spoken before, you said, there are tensions, there are struggles and disappointments that come with any leadership committed to both social and ecological change. And you say, be prepared for resistance, be prepared for disappointment. So I'd just like to invite you, what would you like to share about those very important observations? And in the midst of that, how can we stay hopeful and engaged with all of those tensions and struggles? So first, tell us more about what you mean by that, and then give us some hope and tell us how we can stay engaged.
That's a really good question, and it's a fundamental question because it's one of the things you're going to encounter on this path, without a doubt. And there are ways through it.
Can you say what we might encounter? Can you say a little more about that? What are the resistance and tensions that have come your way and the struggles?
The resistance is to refuse to look beyond the human-centered society that we have, and not to embrace the we of the universe and human and spirit. And there is a resistance because people know that. And so it's understandable. So to respect a person where they are, but to offer an alternative. And so we do need to respect people's fear of change, because that's part of what the struggle is to change. And all you can do is encourage, live by example, and lead. And you're not going to do it perfectly, and you're going to have times when you've made a mistake and you have to admit it. I made a mistake, and I'll tell you the story. I was really on a campaign of stopping cars idling. So anybody coming to the retreat center, if I saw them idling their car, I would run out there and explain to them that they were polluting the earth. And while they were here, would they stop, idling their car? It's wasting gas for sure. And so I had my little, mission that I thought I was really going to focus on this with people coming. Well, then in the fall, I looked out, and when we didn't have a retreat on, but there was a 4x4 Jeep out there idling. And I walked out. There was nobody in the vehicle. I couldn't see anybody around. So I waited, and I eventually went back into the house. I thought, what am I going to do with this? I mean, it's now 15 minutes. So, I mean, my virtuous mission is really being compromised because all this pollution is happening, and I'm getting more angry. Eventually, a young man came back to the car, so I zoomed out there and I gave him what for, and said, "Why ever did you leave this car idling? And do you know what? You're polluting the earth, and this is an ecology center." And he looked at me and said, "I never thought about it. I only came because my parents have come here so often and they find it healing and peaceful. And I just needed that peace. And I went down to the lake and I just stood there and that's all I did. And I never even thought of the car. What problem is it when you leave the car idling? So I had to backtrack and apologize. I realized that that person really didn't know what was important in that. But what was key for him was finding peace. And I had just blown his bubble. So, I look back at that circumstance, and that's where I had to learn to temper my zeal sometimes, because you have to respect where a person is, even though it was just about killing me to see this car out there for 15, 20 minutes idling. I've gone up to people in construction and with the utilities that have left their motors running and advised them that really was important. I know one of our sisters did this as well because she'd seen me do it, and she was in an accident and the police were leaving their car running. So she went up to them and told them that, yes, we need to deal with the accident. Could you please shut off your car because you're polluting the atmosphere? They did shut off the car. But it's that call, and to know that you're not going to do it perfectly, and to forgive yourself when you haven't. Okay, I've learned this. I've learned that I need to moderate my zeal, but not to let go of it, because you can't just be discouraged. And there are people around who are very discouraging, and I've been in endless arguments, and there's sometimes you simply have to say, we have a different point of view, and God bless you, and all I can do is pray for you. That's another perspective of salvation for our time. Because, yeah.
Sorry, Linda, I didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue.
But it's another understanding of salvation for our time. The root word of salvation is to heal. And our mission on earth is to be healers. Jesus didn't talk about salvation in heaven. He said a new earth. If you look in the Bible, you will find just about everywhere the words earth and heaven are spoken together. There is not supposed to be a disassociation. Earth and heaven belong together.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the place where we need salvation today, to be able to convert our spirit to the whole, to the love that encompasses creation, because that love created the universe that we know from the Big Bang. And we know that it's so much more than what we see, and it vaults us into wonder, because there is so much incredible beauty and harmony out there.
Mm-hmm.
And as we look at that, then we say, well, how can I make my life, my way of being, to be a part of that, to be congruent? And so we each have to make our individual choices, and also listen to the passion that's in your heart. Sometimes you just don't know exactly, but you have to follow that passion and live it. And it's always been good, in my sense, to have a community of sisters who have challenged me and helped me to ground myself more in the truth of what I'm about, and to live it more fully.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, we know that in your ecology center, you're literally cultivating the soil and inviting the community to do that with you. How do you see that bringing about transformative change? Tell us a little bit about your project and the effects you're seeing on those who participate in it with you.
I would say it's been humbling. It's been beautiful to see. It's been hard work, and it has grown from just a half a dozen plots to over 80 now. What I learned, we didn't take this on. I was asked to take it on because the community garden had lost its land to development, and then we're looking for safe land that didn't have any nuclear residue, because we're near to Port Hope, which has a lot of nuclear residue in the soil. So I talked to the sisters and they said, oh, sure, we've got lots of land. So then the next year I was coordinator. The coordinator left. So, it just grew from there. And what happened, it was people's desire to connect with the earth and to have that moment of harmony, of excitement, of planting seeds, of struggle with the weeds and with finding ways to do things in a more harmonious way. And people have used this for their own healing. We have had a children's therapy group that was here for many seasons, and we had a mental health group that had a plot, and they would come here just to putter in the garden and to have picnics by the bench by the gardens, because being outdoors and being in nature is one of the healing aspects, is one of the essentials for our human earth connection. We are bereft without it.
Thank you. So just to bring our conversation to a close, or this part of our conversation to a close, do you have one word, one sentence of hope that you'd like to share with everyone here about staying committed and staying engaged in spite of the struggles and the tensions?
Yes, I would say tend to your spiritual life. And the other, well, connected to that is something I didn't mention. In the early years, it was critically important to find other people who had the same vision, and because you need that support. So be sure you have a network of support. You have to live the talk. You've got to walk the talk, because unless you're living what you're espousing or believing in, people are not going to follow, because they don't see authenticity and they don't see integrity. So you have to be true to yourself and take time for meditation, for spiritual nourishment, and to remember it's God's work. It's our Creator's grace, and we are the vehicles. We are the transmission. We are part of the line of making a sacred, holy earth.
Thank you. And in all of that authenticity, integrity, and also building community, you're really identifying, aren't you, some of the key components to transformative change, transformative leadership that leads to transformative change. Thank you so much for this rich conversation, Sister Linda, for sharing of your experience and your insights so generously with us. And we're going to turn things over to Heather now for some interaction.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Carol. And now we have about 10 to 15 minutes to hear from the participants, and I share Carol's invitation to be engaged and consider yourself full participants in this conversation. You can do questions or insights or reflections. I see one in the chat, but I can't. Gabrielle, is it possible to put my screen so I can see everyone in case someone puts their hand up, because I can't see everyone?
Yeah, you could change your view to gallery view.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I could if I could. Just to say, while I try to do that as a non-techie, I'm just going to say I share your fervor for speaking to cars, people who idle their engines. And I haven't quite tempered my fervor, Carol, but I would say it doesn't always go over well. I just asked somebody yesterday on the street to turn off their engine, and they looked at me and they said, "Why?" I said, "Because it pollutes." It was like, "Oh, okay."
Yes.
So, are there any comments and questions? Anyone want to raise your hand while I read what's in the chat? Valerie Kelly.
Hello, everyone. Sister Linda, that was so inspiring, and I've learned a lot from you. I've always found going out into the garden a peaceful making endeavor, except a little frustrating at times with the weeds.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I've learned more about theology and myself and our great creator from your discussion. So thank you for that. I was listening to a CBC conversation just a couple of weeks ago, and the person being interviewed, I can't remember the name, was saying the little things that we do don't really matter around the recycling, because in pollution, it's the big companies that need to be addressed. Our little work doesn't really make any difference. 6 to 9% of what we put in the recycling bin actually gets recycled. And then the next day or a couple of days later, there was the cross-country checkup talking about what are the things that you do to make a difference in the world. And all these people were saying, oh, I go out into the garden, I do this, I recycle that, I wash things out, and blah, 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 blah. And I found such a contradiction, but it's the contradiction I think that we hold in ourselves and in our space, especially here in North America, that we seemingly feel that we are doing what we can do, but it doesn't really make any difference. The world keeps on getting becoming more aware of where plastics are. It's in our blood systems now. And so I think what I've learned from today's discussion or your conversation is that what I do does matter, because it matters to me at the smallest level, and at the transformative level, it can impact those around me. And that is significant and meaningful. And whether the policymakers or whomever needs to go after big businesses, that's a separate component to this and the healing part of our world. And so I think all of those little tiny nuggets of change that we can individually do really does have an impact.
Thank you, Valerie. I'm going to just read a couple of questions that have shown up in the chat, Linda, and then you can respond to Valerie's comment and these, and then Bianca, you had your hand up. So we'll do that in this order. So one person has asked, how do you encourage eco-spirituality through growing things when you only have a balcony or a small patio? So that's a very practical question. How can we shift thinking into introducing people to who are apartment dwellers to growing? One question. Next question. What does integral mean in integral ecology? So those are 3 different comments. If you want to take a minute, Linda, and respond to those, and then we'll move to Bianca.
Okay. Just give me the first question again.
Apartment or balcony
yes.
gardening.
Got it. Wherever you garden, if it's in a pot in your apartment, or if you've got a balcony, you'd be amazed at how much you can put in and grow. And the thing is, you are putting your hands in the soil. You are having communion with plants, which allows you to be in a place of communion with the trees and the grass and the earth. So any little plant helps, and it makes a difference. That's the thing. That's the big lie that's out there, is what our little efforts aren't enough. But they make a difference, and we have to believe that and be grounded in that, because that will grow the movement. next question was
Thanks, Linda. Integral. What does integral mean in integral ecology?
We think that integral ecology is absolutely essential. And Pope Francis has created one of the most fundamental books and mission for our world, because Laudato Si was addressed to the whole globe, to everyone. And integral, as he articulates, is what is including the earth, the universe, the human, and our moral compass. And so at the villa, when we were pondering that, should we just be ecology open to that? And we struggled with it and felt we have to be open to also the spiritual retreats, but put it in an ecological frame. So that's how we have addressed it here, realizing you've got to be integrated into the society, the culture, and the earth and universe. So you have a holistic approach.
Thank you, Linda. So what I'd like to do is, Bianca, you could make your comment or question, and then Daryl, hi Daryl, nice to see you. You could make your comment and question, and then back over to you, Linda, and then there's another question in the chat that we'll get to after that. So Bianca, Daryl, and then Linda.
Thank you very much, Linda. This was very inspiring, and I just wanted to make a comment that your story of the Butchart Gardens, in terms of transforming those wounds of the earth into a beautiful garden where so many people go to see, and then connecting that to our own personal traumas and how nature contributes to it. It really allowed me to have this sort of parallel between people being able to heal the nature that was wounded, and nature being able to heal people that was wounded, and to reflect on that mutual relationship. So thank you for that.
The mutual relationship is very important, and we are a part of each other. That's our interdependence that's being described. Thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you, Bianca and Linda. Daryl.
Hi, Linda. It's great to hear from you. I think it was over 30 years ago when I was in the seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my community to let me go to my mother's community, as part of my formation as a priest, was to go to my own community for learning about my own identity, my culture, and everything like that. So went to Chaging First Nation. I was there for a semester, and you were the pastor there, you and Sister Marilyn Murrah. And I had such a great time that semester there with both of you, and learned. And what my question is this: they say Native people are close to the land, or identify with the land. That's a part of the cultural component, is to be connected to the land. And even though the Ojibwe people living at Chaging, at West Bay, I think at the time we called it West Bay,
Yes.
They're no longer nomadic. They weren't living off the land like they did generations ago. They were, nevertheless, was there anything there that might have given you some insight about land and cultivate that you would have learned from them? Was there anything that it's a damaged community. All Native communities are suffering from levels of assimilation and all that. And but I wondered, is there any insights maybe about what it means to be connected to the land that you got from your time at West Bay at Chaging First Nation?
Thank you, Daryl. And it's good to see you again. I would say that, yes, there were so many tragic stories, and there was much pain, and I knew from my preparation that it was the post-colonial effect. And so I tried to learn, and we had an elder at West Bay, Teresa Panamick, and she was the one who supported us and actually helped us. One of the things that was most important was at Easter, we were talking about, do we order palms, or how do we approach this? And she said, well, no, you can't order palms. We don't do it that way here. So we went out into the bush, and it was a long trek. And until we found a grove of cedars that she said their spirit, it's pure here. It hasn't been affected by the society out there. We can take this. But she knelt down and made a little hole and put some tobacco in it and prayed in Ojibwe. And then I didn't exactly understand what's going on. And then she turned to me and says, now you do it, sister. And I said, well, I can't talk in Ojibwe. She says, all you have to do is let the spirit of the tree know that you are asking permission to take this cedar to use for a sacred purpose. The tree will be honored. So I did make my offering of tobacco and earnestly asked for permission from the tree to use it for a sacred ceremony. And I felt blessed in that moment. It was one of the most fundamental learnings I had working with Indigenous people is the relationship to creation, that the trees are my brothers, and all creation is a part of the wonderful plan. And as humans, elders would say, why do we think this business you have about man being the top of the line and the apex of creation, it is all wrong. It's backwards according to Indigenous understanding, because it was the plants and the mosses and the fish and all the mammals and trees and shrubs, and they all learned how to live in harmony on this earth. And we were the very last ones. We're the young kids in the hierarchy. We're the ones who have to listen to our brothers and sisters in creation and ask them how they do it. So those two learnings were fundamental for me. I as a white person, even in farming, I never thought of asking the field for permission to sow it. I never thought of that aspect of relationship. So Daryl, that was a key learning for me.
And Teresa was my great aunt.
Yeah.
Teresa Panamick was my mother's aunt. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. So we only have a couple of minutes left, and there are a couple of comments I will read, and then there's another question or two. So one person said that in answering the question of how to grow vegetables, or what do you grow if you only have an apartment or a balcony, this person said that during COVID, a small patio garden enhanced my own transformation of healing by watching my vegetables grow. And
Yes.
so there's that. Another person was commenting of living in Calgary and having given up a car is rather difficult, especially with the short growing season and when cities are designed for cars. So this is just a comment, and it's one that many of us who live in cities that are designed for cars, not public transportation or walking, are facing. There's a person who has asked a question about the refugee crisis and empty Catholic monasteries and churches. So just note, Linda, we have like 1 minute left for a question that is very difficult to answer, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. So the ecological refugee crisis, which of course is global, and the fact that there are empty Catholic churches and monasteries. Do you have any short insights on that?
I can only say from my own experience, and I have been involved with 2 refugee families, we have to be open to them. I cannot answer to empty cathedrals and monasteries. Most monasteries are reconverted for another use of housing. And cathedrals are expensive, and yet there is something about speaking to the awe of the human spirit. And it's one of those questions that you can't really have an answer for. You can't just house people in an empty monastery. You have to integrate them into the society. That is what I've learned in working with the 2 refugee families I've been involved with. I wish there was easy answers, but there are just the answers that we make in our own journey, and we chart it on the way, keeping in mind the tenets of integral ecology, and knowing that our faith is leading us to holistic communion with everybody. And how do we break down the barriers that are there? How do we build up the perimeters, the sacred space of each animal and each human? It's the task we're about.
It is. Thank you, Linda. Thank you to everyone for your questions. Some of them, what do we do with the corporate structure and the rampant capitalism that Valerie Kelly asked, is a question we have to ponder, as well as refugees, empty churches, and also what we can do in the day-to-day that's small, but is also nourishing for ourselves and for the world. So we did cover quite a lot of ground. I want to thank Carol and to thank Linda. We do have to close, and I just want to remind you all that we do have a new master's in leadership, ecology, and equity that is beginning in the fall. So ask all of your relatives and yourselves to please apply. We're accepting people, and it's a great program. We're quite excited about it. We also have an event in June 4th and 5th. The event is called Building Beloved Communities Through Peace. And this is with Dr. Reverend Julia Robinson Moore and Reverend Ricky Moore. I don't know these people, but it's supposed to be a very good event, and we're hosting it at our school. We're also hosting another conversation in June. Gabrielle, you had information about that?
Yes, it will be with the Vice Chief, Ikwassanet First Nation, Adeline Bazil, but there'll be more information sent by email. So if you're here today, you'll get the follow-up email with the further details.
And also, if you ever missed a conversation that we had, I mean, we've hosted several conversations this year with Mary Evelyn Tucker, some of you are involved, but also with Gregg Abbott, with also David Corey. We've held several conversations, and they're all available on YouTube, and Gabrielle always has this information. And we invite you to be a part of our school's ongoing community discussions. And I thank you all today for coming, and especially to Linda and to Carol. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Stay well, everyone.
Thank you.